Joining us today on Pirate Radio Live, David Glenn, DG, with the, all the accolades for David Glenn. He's been with us for years here on Pirate Radio, doing big things now on YouTube. DG, how we doing, sir?
I'm doing great, Clip. Good to be with you.
Man, there's a lot going on. Usually we start with East Carolina when we bring you on the program, but might as well hit the big news statewide and nationally in the football world. Bill Belichick becoming the head coach at North Carolina. And David, you have an interesting brain, a brain that is a little more effective than mine. So my first thought when I heard it last week was like, what's the catch? Like, what is he doing Bubba Cunningham a favor? Like, what's going on here? So take me back to last week, David. When you first heard about this, did you think it was legit? Did you think this would end up happening? Like, what was your first thought when you heard Bill Belichick's talking to North Carolina?
My first reaction was that it was unlikely. And I didn't know at the time whether either on Bill Belichick's end, he just wanted his name back out there because he had swung and missed during the last NFL cycle. He had become a little bit disillusioned with how he had been treated in that process. And that when we all glance at the NFL right now, maybe there's an opening in Jacksonville, or maybe he would go through a whole nother NFL cycle and not get an offer. So I thought it could have been posing on his part. It could have been posing on Carolina's part, because I've covered enough coaching searches that I know there are many times where they just want to throw some chum in the water for the media, get them talking about it for 7 straight days. Meanwhile, maybe we didn't even know they were interviewing A, B, C, D, and E multiple times behind the scenes. So it could have been a smokescreen from either side.
Yeah.
Again, that was my initial impression. But here we are. And, ESPN's calling it one of the most stunning, compelling developments in college football history, which we could debate whether that's an exaggeration or not. But it certainly is one of the bigger stories to hit our state in my 30-whatever years covering this stuff.
Well, David, more and more you have to check multiple sources and everything when you see stuff online. You don't know what's true, what's not true. So is the 400-page manifesto and the lining up his son for a future job, is all that factual right now?
That is fact. That is fact. Someone asked me if I could submit a Freedom of Information request. For those who don't know, we in the journalism world can give those to public universities, and then after the legalese is figured out, sometimes they have to share it with us because they're a public university. I don't believe the 400-page manifesto will qualify as, the same category as, say, Bill Belichick's contract, parts of which have already been shared with us in the media. So we might never see that, but it was real, and it was shared with the various decision makers at Carolina. And now we do know some of the contract terms as well. In terms of Stephen Belichick, I have thought all along, Clip, that he was one of the most central parts of this whole story. What's the first answer to why you would hire even the most decorated 72-year-old coach? Carolina's answer to that all along has been, in part, well, Bill wants his son to be his successor. And Carolina at least entertained the idea. Of course, Bill can hire Steve if he wants him to be his defensive coordinator. That's not the sticky part. But if Bill wanted some kind of promise in writing that Steve would be his successor in Chapel Hill, whether it's 3 years, 5 years, or 7 years from now, that's a lot trickier to write. And I say that as a contract attorney for 20 years, What was weird about the press conference this week is that the Steve Belichick question wasn't really answered.
Yeah.
It was asked a couple times, but I don't think we got much clarity there. Bill did say he was not disrupting his coaching targets who were in the midst of bowl preparations. Well, that would include his son, Steve, with the Washington Huskies, because they're headed to the postseason. But, of course, it makes more sense for the broad picture if the Tar Heels liked both Bill Belichick for obvious reasons, but also Steve Belichick, who's in his late 30s, as a possible successor to Bill in Chapel Hill.
David Glenn joining us. I did, speaking of the Freedom of Information, I was listening to a show, kind of a sports comedy show, but they were saying, hey, if we could get into his emails now, watch out, Danny Beal and all you Patriots fans out there. We could get back to the Deflategate stuff. You think Bill's taking care of those emails, if there are any, after all these years? So,
Oh my gosh. Well, I guarantee you that at every public university, one of the first things they say to anybody who's unfamiliar with working at public universities is, hey, keep in mind when you're using your office account, that is at least theoretically subject to public consumption. I know, Clip, as someone who's communicated with a lot of coaches and athletic directors over the years, just as a member of the media, I have always had in the back of my mind, there is a chance that my back and forth text, my back and forth emails with some athletic director, some coach at some public university, I better be careful with what I'm writing, what I'm saying in those emails and texts, because absolutely there are scenarios where that would become public information. Now, I don't think that's ever happened because, my communications are not typically super sensitive. But if you're Bill Belichick, absolutely right now, it is on your radar, not your old personal emails, but anything you do moving forward.
Right.
Yeah, that's at least theoretically subject to public consumption.
One more on this, and we'll move on. But I was asked last night. I was on a gentleman's podcast about will it work out? And I've been wrong 100 times. I've been right maybe 5 with these things. But like, if I had to put a few bucks on it, David, I would say North Carolina becomes a factor sooner rather than later, and you can flip rosters and do things very quickly now in college athletics, college football. I think I had all the questions everybody did at first, like can he connect with the kids, and the whole talk of was it Chris Long or whoever said, yeah, it was winning was nice, but it wasn't fun in New England. We didn't have fun. Like, is it going to be fun for 19 and 20-year-olds? I don't know, but you hear Mike Tomlin yesterday on Pat McAfee's show say, hey, my boys are out of college, but I'd have sent them their one-way ticket in a heartbeat. So he's going to get some talent. He's going to coach them up. I would lean towards it working out in a pretty good way for North Carolina. How do you feel about that?
I lean in the same direction as you just described, and I see some of the same possible ways that it could go wrong.
Yeah.
I do remind people, I'm a guy in my 50s, and I look at the world a little differently than I did in my 40s or my 30s. Bill Belichick is a 72-year-old man, and this is not a punchline, but with a 24-year-old girlfriend. And he's been there, done that. He's been hired and celebrated and fired and criticized and divorced. And now he has a 24-year-old girlfriend. Like, those who know him well say that he can be a witty, funny, down-to-earth guy behind the scenes. Now, we've also seen the surly press conference guy, right? But I think he's being honest when he says that he was always intrigued by college football. It just never worked out for obvious reasons. He was busy winning 6 Super Bowls, among other things. But I wouldn't be surprised if he has a different look at life right now. And I believe him when he says, although, visiting young people's living rooms on official visits, it just doesn't happen as frequently as it used to. It's just a different world, thanks to Zoom and on-campus visits. And head coaches are not beating the recruiting trail the way they used to.
Right.
It's just a different world. Now you have a general manager of UNC football. He'll still have to recruit, but I think the sales pitch is compelling. Most of the top players, portal, high school, or otherwise, want to envision themselves as at least having a shot at the NFL. And it's a very credible sales pitch for Bill Belichick to say, I can teach you how to get there. And, oh, by the way, I'm now coaching at a top 5 public university. Absolutely, things could go sideways. I noticed in the way the contract was written, Bill Belichick, it's not expensive for him to leave if he wants to. After the first 3 years, it's actually not expensive for the Tar Heels to fire him if it didn't work out. So this is not like one of those $15, $20 million buyouts that, protects a guy like Dave Doran at NC State right now. Belichick and Carolina wrote up a contract that's designed in part to reflect the fact that he's 72 years old. But I see the positives far outweighing the negatives. If you ask me, are the Tar Heels going to win the national championship under Bill Belichick? I'd say no, right? But could they win their first ACC title since 1980? I'd say it's less likely, yes, So I would bet no if I only had two choices. Does he get that done in 3 years? But do they have a chance in a way they've rarely had a chance to be that relevant in the last 40 plus years? I think they have a chance. And they're already getting their money's worth in terms of boosters being motivated to donate. And people are going to watch these football games. And people are going to go to that stadium. And whether the buzz lasts one season or 3 or 5, who knows? But if I were the decision maker at UNC, I would have gone down this road because at some point, Carolina has played football for 136 years, Clip, and they have never, until now, taken an aggressive, expensive approach to football. Never.
Yeah.
Bill Belichick is paid right behind guys like Kirby Smart of Georgia and Dabo Swinney of Clemson. He's one of the 10 highest paid coaches in America, and Carolina is upgrading other budgets in support of him. That's never happened. They've taken half swings with Butch Davis's hire, or even Mac Brown the second time. He was already a national championship coach at Texas. But this is a rarity, and it's truly unprecedented, really, the degree to which Carolina is taking the full swing at trying in football. Doesn't mean it'll work out, but I think it's going to be fun to watch no matter how it goes.
Good insight from David Glenn joining us. David, okay, I do have one more question on this. Will Bill Belichick be one-on-one with David Glenn on the North Carolina Sports Network between now and the start of next college football season?
Yes. It may not happen until next summer. But I think it'll happen between now and the first kickoff. I'd love for it to happen soon. I'm sure I'm not the only one in line for something like that.
Oh, yeah.
And I look forward to it. But yeah, I think it's going to be difficult, especially, the deal. The portal, the first portal window goes from this past Monday through December 28th. So Bill's got his hands full because right now he doesn't have much of a football team, and he better hit that portal hard if he's going to be able to compete the way he wants to compete. And that is going to – I'll be surprised if he does a lot of media in the month of December. After that, it is part of Carolina's plan to let him do his existing media obligations, meaning the national stuff with the Manning brothers and other appearances.
Yeah.
So you can tell that Carolina wants those public platforms for Bill Belichick. They want his face out there now that he is the face of UNC football. So it's intriguing that he's going to keep doing those media obligations even as he's the Tar Heels head coach. Those of us here in North Carolina, we're probably a little lower in the pecking order of his priorities media-wise. but yeah, I think he's going to make the rounds. And as you saw at the press conference, he was a much kinder, gentler version of himself than he was, that surly guy at those Patriots press conferences over the years.
That's kind of a new trend. I don't know if you can call it a trend. There may be more examples, but Belichick, acting head coach and doing stuff with the Mannings. Doug Gottlieb has his radio show and is a head basketball coach. And I think Dion, when he was at Jackson State, was doing stuff with Barstool, like weekly NFL picks and stuff like that. So that would have been, unheard of, taboo years ago, David. And who knows, we might see more and more of that stuff.
That's the world we're living in, right? Carolina football does not have the brand recognition of Carolina basketball, Carolina women's soccer, even the broader term Carolina athletics. Football has kind of sagged compared to, there must be eight or so national championship sports teams at the University of North Carolina. Historically, football's never come close to one, hasn't won even a conference title in 44 years at this point. So it's smart for the Tar Heels to let Bill Belichick kind of continue to make those rounds because moms watch, dads watch, and depending on which shows you're doing, a lot of young people watch as well. And if that funnels into recruiting results, Bill Belichick is going to be happy about that.
All right. Apologies to the Pirate fans who are tuned in saying, where's the ECU talk? David, it'll be ECU and NC State in the Military Bowl. Talked to Corey Smith from Pack Pride earlier this week. We'll talk to Joe Giglio next week, getting the kind of the state part of it. And because these things do come down to who wants it, who's kind of buying in. Of course, you mentioned the portal. It comes down to what players are going to be on the field during the kickoff as well. But ECU has a good group of seniors, the D line, especially with Deontay Johnson, Sarad Ware, Elijah Morris, Rajay Harris at running back, guys that have been here 4 or 5 years, enough of a core that they want to right some wrongs. I heard our buddy Alex Harper, the long snapper on the Pirates, said, hey, State beat me in my first game here. I want to go out a winner in the last game. So I think the want-to factor, and from the new coach Blake Harrell, this is big for him. Pirates have struggled against in-state opponents. This is a big game for Coach Harrell. So the Pirates will have the want-to factor. We'll see if Dave Doran and NC State does. They had a kind of a weird one, right, David, where they're top 25 going into the year. There was a time where they didn't even know if they'd be going to a bowl game, but got the win and capped it off with North Carolina. So that want-to factor, David, do the Pirates have an advantage in that department, or do you think State's going to show up to play?
I think because it's ECU, a 6-6 Wolfpack team will be more motivated than it would have been in a run-of-the-mill bowl game. And you're right. Between opt-outs and the who cares factor, I mean, those guys, they love their swag bags. It is cool to go to a bowl. For those who haven't been to even the smallest bowl, 6-6 in some scenarios against 6-6, it's fun. Like, the players overwhelmingly enjoy it if they haven't already mentally checked out. You get to do cool things. They feed you good food. You get truly, I forget what the limit is these days, but NCAA rules allow for these, pretty nice swag bags, or even they'll take you to a department store and just say, you can have X $100 each. Go get your stuff. Like, it's kind of cool. And then the question becomes, well, how badly do you want to play the very violent sport of football, which even if you only played it at a lower level, it's not always fun to stick your face in the fan. It's a tough sport. So I don't think there'll be a massive edge in terms of motivation here. I haven't seen all the latest on sometimes guys transferring will still play in the game.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if any of these guys are doing that because, Casey Concepcion's maybe the Wolfpack's best player in any of the 3 phases of the game. He's on his way out the door via the transfer portal. I don't think he's going to play, best I could tell. But Zakai Barker of the Pirates is a heck of a player. Is he going to play on his way out the door, or is he truly out? It'll be fun. CJ Bailey, the quarterback for the Wolfpack, will play. Caton Hauser, who was part of the resurgence for ECU, he's going to play. So you have some key pieces, but man, it's hard enough to predict these games when you know who's playing. Right? I mean, right now not only are we not sure about the motivation factor, I still think here, with what we're 2 weeks out from the game, I think there could be some personnel changes between now and then.
I think last time we talked, David, ECU might have been in the midst of winning a couple of games, but haven't talked to you since the 4-game win streak. It ends against Navy, the hiring of Blake Harrell. What did you think of the way the Pirates closed out the season and the addition of Blake Harrell as full-time ECU head football coach?
Well, he's a guy who knows ECU. He's a guy who motivates his players. He has a great energy level and a charisma about him. One question that I had from afar is, and I would have had for whether it was ECU's chancellor or athletic director, why do you believe Blake Harrell led that 4-game winning streak and then the loss to Navy? Do you really believe Mike Houston would have had different results?
Right.
And there may be a great answer to that question. But I think we'd all agree that Blake Harrell's 4-0 winning streak came against lesser opponents. And the first time he ran into a tougher opponent, like Mike Houston ran into, Army, 11-1 right now, they lost. So that part gives me pause. But clearly the players like him. If he can be a good part of fundraising, that'll be a big deal as well, because that's a huge part of a coach's job description in the name, image, likeness era. But I have a lot of respect for Mike Houston. And sometimes there are explanations in the locker room behind the curtain about why you stopped believing Mike Houston can be the guy. Looking at it from afar, and again, I'm not in that locker room. I'm not in those coaches' meetings, obviously. I really didn't see any reason Mike Houston couldn't have won those 4 games or gone 4-1 down the stretch. You may have an answer to that, but I don't feel like I know the answer to that.
Yeah, that's something we talked about quite a bit. Would Mike Houston have won these games? Would Blake Harrell and Caden Hauser have beaten App State and Liberty? We've also thrown that one out there. So
Right.
and the question that will not be answered, maybe leaked out in the future. I know it won't be answered, David, because I asked John Gilbert to his face on Pirate Radio Live the other day. Who was behind door number 2? Who are the other options? And of course, he's not going to come out and say that. But
Right.
it's kind of hard to say, all right, we made the right move when you don't know what the other options were. So I know this, like Pirate fans are on board for the most part with Blake Harrell. Really connects to the people around here and is a very genuine guy. I don't text a lot of coaches. I stay away from that, but I do have somewhat of a relationship with Blake Harrell where I texted him after a road win and we're doing the post game show and he hits me back 10 seconds later. Like he he really does connect with people well, and he's got to win games. That's the bottom line.
Right.
So we'll see what happens from that regard. David Glenn joining us. I've got a million things to talk about. We're about out of time. David, are you surprised? I don't know. Going into the year, did you think 2 ACC teams get in the playoff?
I thought there was a good chance because I knew Miami would be really good. They, of course, ended up barely missing the playoff. I knew SMU would be the best of the 3 newcomers to the ACC, having won the American a year ago and having 2 quarterbacks that they really liked coming into the season. So I was surprised in the end that SMU did so well, winning 11 games, but it didn't surprise me at all that they were in the mix for the top of the ACC and even the playoff. And Clemson's Clemson, right? They had to kind of come back late from a slow start to win the ACC title yet again under Dabo Swinney. But when you're a 17-team league, which the ACC is for the first time this past season, you have a chance to end up with 3 or 4 teams that are up there in that 10 or more win range. And those were 3 of the candidates that I thought way back in August. Of course, most of us thought Florida State would be one of those candidates too. Things went quite differently for the Seminoles. But it's very good for the ACC that they got to. It would have been embarrassing if they only got one. I thought the committee made the right decision this year, leaving Alabama out at the expense, putting SMU in at the expense of Alabama and others. And it's definitely good news for the ACC. This league's taken a lot of hits to its football reputation, but it had 3 prominent teams in the national conversation all year. 2 of them got in, and now it's up to those 2, both on the road, to at least one of them needs to win a game. Otherwise, it'll just feed the ACC as a second-tier league in football kind of narrative.
Who's got the best shot, SMU or Clemson? SMU in Happy Valley and Clemson going to Austin.
To me, it's SMU, and it's more to do with the opponent, in my opinion. I do view Clemson and SMU as equals, right? I mean, as they showed in the ACC championship game. Credit to the Tigers for winning, but if they played each other 7 times, it might be a 4-3 type of margin. I think it's infinitely harder to go to Texas, a team whose only 2 losses were to the same squad, the Georgia Bulldogs, who are just mega talented, especially on defense, in a way that I don't think Clemson is quite as dominant this year. So it really, again, it has more to do with the opponent. I don't view Penn State at Happy Valley as nearly as unbeatable as I view Texas in Austin. So SMU has that mobile quarterback in Kevin Jennings. They're very sound in all 3 phases of the game. They have a shot against Penn State up there in Pennsylvania. And if I had to pick one to win, I would pick the Mustangs.
And while David's here, it's 40 bowls in 14 days. We'll have David pick the Game Above Sports Bowl. That's Pittsburgh and Toledo, David. So as I read this, think about that matchup. Brought to you by Tub Thumpers Beverage House. Next time you're in Greenville, David, check out Tub Thumpers, located 623 Red Banks Road in Arlington Village. One-stop shop for a unique selection of local brews, fine wines, and handcrafted meads. Tub Thumpers, where your next favorite drink is waiting. Great spot to pick up some great beverages, to take them home, and enjoy all these bowl games. David, your game, as I mentioned, the Game Above Sports Bowl. Thursday, December 26th, 2 o'clock, ESPN. You got the Rockets of Toledo taking on the Pitt Panthers. Who wins that game, DG?
It's funny. If I was really at the betting window, I would have to look up whether a young guy named Eli Holstein, he's the Pitt redshirt freshman quarterback. He's a transfer from Alabama and a really talented guy, won the job even as a redshirt freshman, was really good all year, then got hurt. So is he playing? Because if he's playing, I like the Panthers to win. But he did miss, I think, the end of the regular season. So I don't know if I'm allowed to ask you to do that homework for me.
I'm going to give you an asterisk. I'm gonna circle Pitt with an asterisk on it, and if he does not play,
if Eli Holstein plays, I want the Panthers. They probably have announced this, and I haven't even seen it. I forget the exact injury he had, but yeah, thank you for allowing me the asterisk.
There you go. David, awesome stuff, man. Great to catch up with you. Well, we'll see if we can track you down day of the bowl game on the 28th and talk more with you. But I really enjoyed it, man. Hope your folks have a Merry Christmas. Thank you so much, DG, for joining us this football season, man.
Yeah, merry and happy to you and all the folks at Pirate Radio, all your listeners. They've been a big part of our success at the new North Carolina Sports Network. So I always have fun visiting with you, Clip. Thanks for the invitation. I'd be happy to join you again once we know more about who's actually playing in that great bowl game.